Thank you to everybody for this invitation. I propose to Rock to have this short presentation for having a basic understanding of what degrowth is about, and from then we can move to a discussion on the base of it. So basically, my idea is to go very quick on the slides, because what is interesting, I think, for you and for me, it's the discussion and clarification on what I'm going to present. So basically, there are three things that I would like to stress, and then you get at the end of my presentation the fact that our fever for growth is the cause of multiple predicaments. So there are many issues that growth ideology is causing. The second is that degrowth is a complex system of proposal. So it's a change of institutional, collective, and everyday practices. Okay, so this multiple aspect of the change that we need is very important. Too much times, indeed, the focus has been done on the personal changes. I think this is also important, but it's part of a transformative project of transforming collective and community practices as well as institutional one. And then the third message is the focus of a sort of paradox that you can find in the degrowth scholarship and discussion. So the fact that on one side there is a great emphasis on the everyday practices and collective endeavor and challenges of transforming the everyday system in which we are embodied in. But then many times you can find in degrowth narrative and discourses the focus are on policies. So there is this paradox between the emphasis on grassroots and on the other side on the proposition of proposals, without having a clear theory of state to understand how these proposals can be fostered. Okay, so this is one of my main concerns, and my contribution to the degrowth debate is exactly about the state. So I'm very happy to present this because it's an ongoing development of my thought about this. So if you have critics, suggestion will be also very helpful to me to make clear the point. So let's see. Basically, this is a revision of what has been produced. I have been part of the Spanish sort of degrowth community. And as you can see, Spain has been very central in the production of the knowledge around degrowth practices. Then you have a series of different kind of production of papers, basically. And you can see that there are papers on public health, on food, on the consumption theories, housing. But most of the paper, above all, to somehow gain legitimacy of the degrowth discourses in scientific environment, were about conceptual or normative discussion of degrowth. So basically, what is degrowth? And many times when we start to enter not only in the academic debate, but also in the political and social movement debate, degrowth has been associated with recession. No, if you can see this fantastic model that we propose to explain what is degrowth, growth can be defined as more of the same. So we can solve things doing more of the same things that we are doing, then basically what we have experienced after the crisis and still we are experiencing in Europe is a sort of stationary state where the GDP is not increasing so much, has not been like that in Slovenia, that has been considered the tiger of Europe for some years. If you want, we can discuss about it also. But the point was that basically you do the same of the same. And then during the real crisis of 2007, 2008, and 2009, we have experienced the recession. So the national economy were not even able to do the same of the same, but they were doing the less of the same. So many times, many people, politicians, social movement activists, and scholars were saying, okay, we have a recession, we have degrowth, no? But degrowth is not about doing less of the same. It's trying to do things simply different. So let's see in what consists degrowth. Is first of all is a process of unlearning the idols and false notion of growth that has been pushed above all in the westernized society. Okay, so I mean westernized is not just Western, but where the culture of Western has been diffused. So it touches also space that are not properly defined as Western country. On the other side, degrowth consists also of proposing and acting for transformation, for a social, ecological transformation. So the point are two. One, we need to unlearn. We need to be able to discard the knowledge that we have been acquired being part of a westernized society and lifestyle. It's one of the most performative expression of this kind of false notion. And on the other side, we have also the propositive side, let's say, how we transform the society, okay? So the first part, it's a sort of past destiny. So is the diagnosis that the degrowthers are proposing. The second part is about the therapy. Which kind of therapy we want to propose to solve the problem that we face in the westernized society. So is degrowth, so is a, first of all, in a very simple terms, if I have to explain, when I explain this to my mom or to my grandmom, I say the idea of growth is that in order to stay well, you need more, okay? Or to stay better, you need more and more. This is the basic, very basic common sense that is diffused in the growth society, okay? To this common sense, please focus a little bit on this idea of common sense, because it's basically very central in the discussion that then we will have about the state. And it's very central in my proposition. On the other side, we contrast with this idea of in order to stay well, we need more, with this idea of that basically was also very much proposed by Gandhi, for example, in India, that we need to live simply so others, human and non-human, may simply live. Okay, so this is the common sense that we want to confront with the other common sense of growth society. So the live simply is just because we want to recognize not only physical, but also, we will say, ontological space to human and non-human otherness, okay? So basically, let's see then how we compose this is the diagnosis and prognosis, okay? There is different component. I cannot go deep on this discussion, but if you want, after with question, we can address specific issue. You know that there is a model component. It was already criticized in the 1972. The fact that running a mathematical model based on the growth of 5 variables, the Meadows group predict that there was a collapse in one variable or all around 2050. This is the model component of the predicaments. Okay. Then there is a biophysical component. Biophysical component basically is very important. This is a metabolic flow of materials that we use in Europe, in the 27 Europe. So Slovenia is also in. What is important to understand here, above all, to make a point about circular economy and why, from a degrowth perspective, circular economy is basically bullshit if we stay in the same system of expansion of economy. If you look at the yellow and green, I hope that the screen of these slides make you see properly the color. If you look at the yellow and the green, you can understand that the almost 45% of all the material that we use, specifically the yellow one, are carbon material, so oil or carbon, and so basically they are not renewable. So the 25% of all the material that we mobilize to make our economy possible, it's basically not renewable. So there is not circular. There is nothing circular in our economy. This is very important to understand the biophysical component. Indeed, basically you can see that in Europe we just recycle the 13% of all the material that we use. Then there is the biophysical, from another perspective of biophysical component, you know that we have reached and crossed many of boundaries. So in terms of biodiversity, phosphorus cycle, nitrogen cycle, and for example, we start to have a lot of problem with land use, and of course, climate change is coming too. So it's very important also from biophysical component, not only to understand the boundary, but as I said, also the metabolic flows, to understand how these monster in expansion that are our socioeconomy can create. Okay. Then we have always from a biophysical component. I hope that many of you already have seen the graphs of the ROI and the production of oil, the Uber curve that somehow speak about the peak oil. If you see, I think the left part of the graph, you can see that basically the oil on USA was predicted by Hubert, that was the geologist making the development of this geophysical component to understand when the oil in USA start to be energetically uneconomic to extract, that in 1970 you have the peak oil in USA. Okay, this is very important because it was basically, you can see that the blue, sorry, wait. Okay, my daughter was asking for a tea. Okay. Anyway, so in 1970, basically you can see that the blue line give you the exact empirical number of extraction of oil, and you can see that the theoretical curve was perfectly able to describe the peak oil in USA. What is also important, if you see the graph on the right part, you can see that, for example, the USA import cross the curve of peak extraction in around the 1990s. So normally I make the question when the presentation is face-to-face, what happened in 1990s? Well, basically we know that in 1970s there was the first great crisis of oil worldwide, and this is in coincidence with pig oil in USA. In 1990s, when basically what is this graphic saying is that the needs of oil for USA start to be so high that USA need to import, because he cannot produce any more all the oil that he needs. And we know that in 1990s there was the Iraq war, basically. So I'm not saying that this is the cause of the Iraq war, but we know that there is a fact that describes that in that moment, in that period, USA had the first time in its history crossing the needs and the import of oil from abroad with the production, the ability to produce. So again, biophysical component. Then there is also, so we have seen a model component, a biophysical component, and then I want to stress the class component. So there is an issue about redistribution. This is the redistribution of income in USA for almost 100 years, from 1970 to 2007. As you can see, there are different regimes. So the liberals up to 1930, then the Keynesian and neoliberal. Okay. What is important here is that if you see the crisis in 1929 and the crisis of 2007, exactly before the crisis, there is the highest level of concentration of income in very few hands. Because you see the black line is the 0.1% of population, as 10% of all the income in 1929. The 1% was almost to 25%, and the 5 richest people in USA had almost 40% of all the income in USA. This is just before the crisis, and you can see that basically the same kind of concentration is seen when the crisis of 2007 happened. This is very important because it's somehow the description of class components. As I said at the beginning, one of the main aspects that Degrowth is trying to underline is that the predicament of our actual society are multiple. So again, there are model, ecological, biophysical, class components of the crisis. For example, if you see the real wage, so the part of income that go to the working class in Europe you have 78, almost 75% in 1981 went to the working class, but in 2001 it was just 76%. Nowadays is even lower. It means that basically we are experiencing as a working class less and less capacity to acquire the income that we produce as a worker. And this is another aspect of the class component. No, on one side you can see the concentration of income in very few hands. On the other side, the declining capacity of the working class to get part of the reach of the wealth that they produce. Then the last component is about the gender component. This is very important too, because you can see that. Sorry, I think in this graph there is an error. No, it's okay. It's okay. So you just fix on the violet and the green. So the violet is the paid work. So this is the time, the amount of time that people dedicate to paid work in Catalonia. Okay, you can see that men work in market almost 40% of their time, and they work, let's say, for the reproduction of the household. So at home, making cleaning and making what is needed to reproduce its own household, like 60% of its time. On the other side, you can see that women work Catalonian women work almost 8% of their time in the market. So they still don't have the same capacity to enter in the market as the men, and work almost 60% of their time as unpaid work. Okay, this is very important, because if you sum up these two aspects, you can understand what the men normally don't recognize, but women know very well, that the women work more than men to maintain the well-being of our society. Indeed, if you sum up the men, just 90% of their time working. If you sum up women, then you have 23% of their time working. And you can see that, for example, the orange, that is the leisure, of course, the women dedicate less to leisure because they have to work more. If you want to see a specific generation like my generation, you can see that this a burden for women is even worse. Indeed, women in Catalonia, but it is in all westernized kind of industrialized service society, women work almost 7.8 hours per day, every day of the year. There is no religious feast, there is no civic feast, there is no Sunday, neither summer. Okay, every day of the year, women in this range of age work 7.8 hours per day. If you sum up unpaid and paid work, this is very important, because nowadays a feminist movement is saying that there is a crisis of care, a crisis of reproduction. Women cannot anymore do all the amount of work for the reproduction of their system that they were using to do, because it starts to be unbearable. So we have, again, ecological model component, biophysical component, class component, and feminist component of the crisis. So we have basically, I have presented the point of diagnosis. Just present now what, if economic growth is the problem, what we do, no? How we do different things. And this is in some way how we transform the elephant, no? We have seen. So I cannot go deeply in the many proposals that you can see in the vocabulary that has been translated, as Rob just said. And there are very different kind of proposals, no, for the therapy. What is important that I would just stress, showing some of this proposal, is just that you need to remember to yourself that this transformation cannot come only through a personal transformation. You need to act at different level. You need to act at personal level, but also at community level, as well as social level. So just to make you an example, back to the land, so the neo-rural are the people that come back to the rural space and try to develop agroecology project in a community that want to change the way in which we produce our food. Now, that audit is already at a more political level. Is the audit basically the most important movement after the movement against eviction that we experienced in Spain just before the Indignados movement. So just to understand what this debt is about. Indeed, basically, just to make a point about the tiger of the economic tiger of Europe, so Slovenian nation economy, you can see that you have experienced a high rate of growth during the last decades, but just because you increased tremendously your debt, your public and private debt. And this is the only way nowadays new economic system are able to promote the expansion of their economy. It's through the expansion of their debt. And if you see Slovenia, you can see that during the years in which you experience a lot of growth, you have experienced a rate of growth of your debt. And this debt audit was a social movement trying to address which kind of debt we have as Spanish. Okay, this was a case of Spanish. Then there is work sharing against collective and urban gardening that can be more, again, collective in the neighborhood. So you have plenty of example of proposals, as well as the 10 proposals that we had about abolish GDP, establish resources, so on and so forth. Minimum and maximum income, something that we are now going through when I discuss about the issue of the state. Then you know that there was this very successful letter to the European Commission and policymakers that reached almost 100,000 signatures all around Europe and world. Okay, asking for limits on resource use, reduction in working time, carbon tax, basic maximum income. So the point is that now I want to discuss when we think about therapy is the fact that you can see that there are like a great emphasis on self-organization, community organization, interstitial kind of practitioners in which we create our own collective and community projects to transform the society. But then at the same time, as I show in the last two slides, we address policymakers. I mean the degrowth scholars address policymakers to transform through policies the national economy or European economy and social and European social system. So there is a sort of paradox, no? Because somehow we are addressing the so-called state, but we don't have, as the growth scholars and activists, an idea what is the state about, how it functions, how it can change in a way that it's good for degrowth vision. And this is somehow has been a sort of elephant in the room of degrowth scholarship, is a theory of state, because basically there was a culture of anarchism, no? That it's the main seeds of the humus of degrowth, and somehow there was this sort of taboo discussion about the state. And I think that it's time to have this discussion properly and try to address this paradox. Okay, so what I try to present, as I said, is now what I'm working on right now, the developing of a theory of state for the growth. Okay, so normally what happens is that state is named not only in public space but also in social movement as a thing, as something that is an entity separate, a separate entity from people that normally governs the civil society, no? And this is a problem because normally it underestimates the complex relation between authorities, politicians, and civil society. Also, this reification of the state is also the causes of what can be somehow presented as a Manichaean kind of discussion of state and civil society. Manichaean in the sense that you have on one side the state is the bad things, and then you have the civil society that is the good things. In civil society there is all the solution, and in the state, let's say in this normal discussion, there is all the bad of our future. And I think this Manichaean discussion is also dangerous. Okay, so sometimes in civil society there are the proper seeds that then mix to complex relation with authorities. Okay. So normally there's this division, and then I propose to have a Gramscian approach to the state. Gramsci was one of the founding members of the Communist Party, of Italian Communist Party, at the beginning of the 20th century, and he proposed this idea of political society and civil society are together mingled to create what he called the integral state. Okay. What he was trying to show that is normally the political society is the space of enforcement of some idea, and civil society is the space in which the consent, produced. Okay, so let's say that now, just to think about politics against refugees or against immigrants. Okay, the Prime Minister of Italy, that now is very famous right-wing leader of Europe, in order to enforce the decree against immigration, okay, yes, first of all, able to create a consent in the Italian society. And as you can see, he has a large consent against immigration in Italy. He was in the last European election basically getting on average 30% of all Italian vote. But if you see in specific space like Lampedusa, that is the island where the thousands of immigrants and refugees normally land when trying to reach Europe, he got more than 50%. If you see another small town, Riace, there was there a mayor trying to develop ideas of welcoming refugees for 15 years. After 15 years of successful integration, now Lega Norte, so the party of the Prime Minister, is getting again 45% of all the consents. This is a way of producing consent. Okay, this is very important to understand. So you cannot have enforcement without consent. And the point is that if we are not, as degrowthers, able to create consent around our proposition, then enforcement in political space cannot be possible for us. And this is the process through which we have to try to change the way in which we approach the power, the state. Okay. So the state is a contingent configuration of socio-environmental system that is built around particular hegemonic vision. So the hegemonic vision is built around common sense, consent. Okay. So normally, the hegemony is a particular articulation of some common senses. Remember at the beginning, the basic hegemony of neoliberal westernized society is that in order to have more, in order to stay better, you need more and more. Okay, this is one of the common sense that is on the top of any agenda in political arena nowadays, worldwide. Okay, this is an hegemony that articulates these common senses with many others. Like another common sense now would be many problems of our economy is related to the coming of immigrants and refugees. Okay, so we need to impede refugees to come in order to relaunch the economy in our nation. No, but this always articulated on the top, that in order to reestablish the capacity to create more and so to stay better in one nation, we need to have no refugees and no immigrants if our economy doesn't need it. So the common senses basically are shared frames through which subjects make sense of their world. So if we think about the general world, the common sense is about more to stay better. And if you think about immigrants, we need less immigrants and impede that they come if we want to relaunch our economy. Okay, these two common senses are very important nowadays in political debate. So basically, the state cannot be understood from this perspective as a simple space of enforcement. Because if you enforce an idea that there's no consent in the societal system, then what you do is you create a totalitarian state. So basically, you enforce something even if you don't have the consent of the people. Okay? And this is a risk, because probably the future can be some such of eco-authoritarian kind of democracy, no? That is an oxymoron to put together authoritarian with democracy, but this is something that we could experience in the future, no? Fascist kind of transformation for climate justice. Why not? So this is the point. The state is transformative, so it's transformed through new common senses, new exigence, and this recapture through different narrative that can be also counter-hegemonic. Just to make you a sense, no, of how it can work in terms of policies, if you interpret the state in this way. Again, when I am in a face-to-face kind of presentation, I normally ask when it was that you had a maximum income in a nation state, and normally the people doesn't know this. They think that probably was in the Swedish social democracy or in Angolian kind of Leninist, Maoist revolutionary context, but it was not. Basically, what you have experienced, the maximum income was in USA. So in 1950s up to 1960, if you take above a certain amount of money, you get 91% of taxation, and normally it was up to 250,000 euro per year. In 1950, it means that if you take this to the today kind of income, for example, in Spain, you have only, let's say, Messi or other kind of football player having this kind of income. It's 2 million, 3 million euro. But still, it's important because it's a very symbolic kind of policies in which you say, you know, enough is enough. You cannot earn so much money. It doesn't make sense that you get all this money, or even worse, if you get all this money, it means that many people suffer of indigency in your systems. So basically what is now very far away of the politics nowadays, because even leftist party are not even prepared to say, you know, we need the maximum income. What is important nowadays to build up this idea of enough is to show, first of all, that historically there were many cases in which a maximum income was enforced, and this was, for example, USA. But also, if you see, it was not well. This graph is to show that it was not only 1950, but if you go back or you move forward up to 1980, for example, you have also a maximum taxation of 70% to very high income in USA in 1980s. What is important is that we have to recover this data to show that in the past there was some kind of cap to the income, and probably we have to discuss about cap to wealth, not to income. But what is important is also to start to create these common senses, to show that there are many, for example, corporations, many enterprises in which this idea of enough is already the normal kind of reasoning. For example, Fiare Banca Etica is an Italian bank, now Spanish also, cooperative bank, in which in the statute of the bank you have the maximum income that is just 6.5, just allowed is 6.5 times the minimum income in the bank. It means that if the person working on the front office of the bank when you enter is earning 1,200 euro per month, the CEO of the Banca Etica can earn at maximum 7.80 euro per month. This is not only in Fiare Banca Etica. There are many kind of enterprises in which, in social economy and cooperatives, in which this kind of ratio between maximum and minimum income has been proposed. For example, Degrowth, when we did the 10 proposal, we said, okay, around 30%, 30 times the minimum income. Here in the cooperative, you have 6.5. So it's not a matter of the correct ratio, but it's a matter of discussing when enough is enough. So the ratio can be discussed politically in different contexts, but need to be, first of all, visibilized. Okay, so this is important. First of all, recover historically the fact that the maximum income exists, then visibilize and the many activity of the business that are run in social economy already exist this, in order to make this sort of common sense. And then when you enforce this in political system, in parliament, many of these people will resonate, okay, we already do this in the economy that I'm part of, so that's fine that we also this for national economy. And then the last point that I want to underline, remembering the aspect of the gender issue. We already do, sorry for this, a lot of unpaid work, okay? Basically, for every hour of paid work we do in our industrialized economy, we have 1 hour of unpaid work. So 1-to-1. So we have a lot of activity that we have to do in order to maintain our well-being in our system. This is why I prefer, and Degrowth also is trying to make this point when we discuss about basic income, that the basic income has not to be articulated around an abstract right, human right kind of explanation, but we think that there is a very materialistic determination of why basic income should be spread all around, because we do a lot of work to maintain our well-being, and this is why we prefer to not only speak about basic income but reproductive income, to visualize that there are many work basically done by women mainly that are important to reproduce our system. So this is what makes difference between Degrowth movement with others. First of all, we need to speak together with basic income, also maximum income. It doesn't make sense to speak about basic income without capping wealth, without capping income. Okay. Second point, basic income is not an argumentation made on abstract human rights discussion, but on a very concrete materialistic kind of recognition of the work that we every day do to reproduce ourselves as human beings in community. And just to finish, and I think I stop here to make the discussion possible. Thank you. Okay. The question is how we really try to make this transformation possible, right? So I switch to what? Okay, here. Okay. Yeah. What I was trying to pass was exactly this idea about creation of new common senses. So the idea is that for our practices, we need to create new common senses about what good life means in our context, what justice means in our context, and what uh, are the way in which we, in our everyday life, perform these different common senses. Okay. So from this perspective, it's very important to understand that if you say something at the level of discourses, but your performativity of everyday life, performativity, I used here something that Judith Butler debating a lot. Okay, is a feminist thinker, USA feminist thinker. When you perform something, then this is much more effective to create common senses than just discourses. Okay. Just to make a simple example of that embarrassed me somehow. No, when my daughter that is now around, so I make an example of her. She was somehow racist. Okay, even if I am black, if you can see her, she's blonde and with blue eyes. It's very white kind of daughter, and she was pretty racist in her school because she didn't want to play with the Africans, the people or other kind of immigrants. And I start to, it was a very psychological crisis for me. I'm, revolutionary kind of subject with a daughter that is very conservative and racist, basically. But the point was that I was thinking, yeah, someone was the fault of someone else and so on. And then I start to think about my performance in the everyday life of Barcelona. How I perform my life. So what she as a daughter normally see in myself in the everyday life. What do I do? What are the people that I stay with and I enjoy with, or I make convivial action with. Normally, for example, I like to cook a lot, so I invite people coming in my house. Then I start to think that since she was born and I was living in Barcelona, I basically invite only white people in my house to eat. So she was seeing that I was very generous. At least twice per week, where people that she doesn't know who they were invited to our table. But then I realized, well, basically, they were always white. So she was getting from my performance, not, of course, not from my discourses, because on the level of discourse, I'm very open to every kind of not only different sexuality, but also different color and so on and so forth. But then on my performance, I was creating problem. I was creating the doubt in my daughter. And this is, make this example just to clarify what really means perform what we are proclaiming. Because are the performance of our everyday life that makes sense and create the common sense to our children, to our friends, to our parents, and so on and so forth. Only if we perform what we said, this discourse that we propose became also common sense for others. And so my daughter will not make a difference because of the color of people if I perform coherently with my discourses, but I was not. And this is why then there is a problem. This is why we cannot just confront the coming racist kind of policies against immigrants and refugees with discourses. We need to performance. We do need performative activity that are really able to transmit our capacity to welcome the otherness. And this is the only way, I think, you can then transform institution. You need, first of all, create new common senses. Then when this common sense is perceived as real, then you can enter in the political institution and enforce a new kind of policies. This is what I'm trying to say. Sì. Prendiamo. Well, I think that the letter make a discourse, create a discourse, but it's not what performance. Of course, from a theoretical point of view, and Butler is clear about this, a discourses can be also very performant. Okay. Many examples come from the civil right movement in USA, the African performing their statement, okay, of the right to stay in the same bus. Park is a woman that did that. She performed exactly what she was saying. Okay, I think that the letter was, in that case, is just the creation of a discourses. Is not performative by itself. And we need to perform in order to make these discourses coherent to the eyes of the people that still are not with us. Okay, this is the very central point. You cannot transform. This is very different from a very if you see this from a Marxist perspective, no? The basic idea of hegemony was used a lot by Lenin, and one of the most important discourse of him was what has to be done. What has to be done, and what has to be done is to take the power, take the palace, the Winter Palace, and then we run according to the principle, and so on and so forth. What I'm saying here, following Gramsci, that was very critical of this idea of hegemony, of taking the power, is that first of all you need to perform, you need to create common senses, because if you take the power, if you take the palace, if it's the winter, the white, the black, whatever palace you want to take, if you take the palace before the common senses, the new common senses that you want to articulate to change the world are not still there, what you end up finally is a totalitarian kind of system, and this is what we don't want. So we don't want anymore to perform, to get the power in a way that embrace a path toward totalitarianism. So if we accept that as a premise, then we need to perform in the everyday before taking the palace. Well, I need to be very transparent on this, and then if I need to specify other things, I will do, and I will go deeper. Well, basically, no one in the world needs to grow. If we think of growth in the sense that I was trying to explain in very simple terms, no one in order to stay well needs more stuff. None in the life. Okay. More stuff, it means once that you have enough. Okay, so this is the very central point, because this idea of the South need to grow and we need to degrowth is a very mystification of the argument. We are not speaking about reach and power, and then you get at some point and then you take less stuff and so on and so forth. It's exactly the imaginary of the idea of needed to stay well, you need more stuff. Okay, this is not the point. I think no one, also the poorer or what is defined as the global South, need more stuff to stay well. Okay, this is, I think, is very important to understand. What is needed to stay well is and what is needed to define what the good life is. It's a political debate. So the political debate means that the result will be not the same in every part of the world. And this is why when I say degrowth is also to create space to others ontologically. Okay? For example, when I speak about degrowth with the Brazilian indigenous people, they understand, because basically their imaginary were never developed around the idea of that the good life for indigenous people is to have more stuff. No, they don't have this kind of definition. So for them, it's absurd. But if I present degrowth, of course, in the very important University of São Paulo, Brazil, where the richest people live of Brazil, then they say what you are saying. Because we are rich and you as a rich. So who have the problem with this kind of definition of degrowth is the people that basically see the problem of transforming the society. The rich people in Brazil, they know And this is why you have this kind of authoritarian kind of regime with Bolsonaro that is spreading around Brazil. Is exactly because they understand that in order to democratize Brazil, in order to make possible other life in Brazil, who has to change, who has to give up with the privilege are the rich people of São Paulo. So when I speak of the growth in São Paulo, I have the answer saying, this is something of the rich. But then when I speak in Salvador do Bahia, together with the black community that escaped the slavery and created the Quilombola, the community of rural people, African descendants, making community use of land. They say, this is our life already. Welcome. So there is a completely misleading. All the people that speak in the name of the South, all the people that speak in the name of the poor, are the people that we are trying to address when we say we need to live simply to make space to the others. Of course, then, for many others, it means also to have the ability to access to many things that are basic, that are not more. And this is another point, because recently a French scholar from Brazil, also part of this class, let's say, of Brazil, because an academic in Brazil is not an academic in Europe. An academic in Europe basically more or less earn the same amount of money as, for example, my income is only 10% higher than my brother that is a working class worker, pure working class, I mean, in the firm, okay? But in Brazil, still, academics has a salary that is 7 times the minimum salary in Brazil, okay? He was saying, you know, frugal choice is a privilege of the cosmopolitan class, Eurocentric, petit bourgeois of Europe. But the frugal as condemned, no? Because many people in Brazil has to be frugal because they don't have any option. It's something that you cannot really understand what he was saying. And I think, again, this is wrong. First, because when we speak about frugal or simple life, we are not speaking about people living in favelas, people living without access to water, people living without access to electricity, people without sewage, without any kind of basic needs to give dignity to life. Frugality doesn't mean undignified life, okay? So, of course, all the people that now live in indigency need to have the basic access to everything. Once you have this, you can discuss about frugality. Frugality doesn't mean that you don't have water in your house. Frugality doesn't mean that you don't have the possibility to move in a city because you live in a gated city. Okay? Frugality doesn't mean that you don't have access to certain kind of beaches, as in Brazil happen, no? Where only white people, high class, can go. This is not frugality. So these academics was using the idea of frugality to speak about people that live in indigency, people that are treated as not human, people that are treated as the worst of animals, that even the animal shouldn't have this kind of treatment. So my answer is, when you feel and listen again to this argument about Global South, first, look in the eyes of this person and understand, first of all, if he's speaking as these people or in the name of these people. Normally, if they are speaking in names of these people, they are doing not a proper job, because what they are speaking is covering with justification of a supposedly poor person the threat he or she feels as a privileged person to really face the political vision of growth. Normally. Second, don't play the same game of the people that speak of frugality, as frugality means live without access to the basic materiality that give dignity to life. When we speak about frugality in simple life, we are speaking about choices that come after the basic needs are covered. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Sorry, I was looking at my daughter is asking something. No, stop. No. No.
Non trovo niente per farla.
Ok, 5 minuti abbiamo finito. Okay. So, well, reproduction activity is needed and parenting is claiming back the father. Anyway, well, I think we need to reconceptualize. Hi, thank you to make this point. So the idea of reconceptualization of freedom and autonomy. Okay, basically, freedom and autonomy and many other concepts has been developed in our westernized culture as a liberal principle. So basically, what happened is that this is both those are concepts that are proposed in the name of the individuality. So in the I think what we try to do when we want to reconceptualize this idea of freedom and autonomy is to make this a concept for collective entity, collective act. Okay, because basically this is something that I'm very proud of. I recently write an entry on a new vocabulary that is coming of Boaventura de Sousa Santos. It's a sociologist of Portugal, where I'm working now. There's a dictionary, it's called Alicia Dictionary, so you can access to that. I think basically the idea of freedom and the idea of autonomy that were spreading around in liberal society were this idea that is the really core aspect of the growth. Because for me, the growth doesn't come simply from the top, from a corporation, from the state that force us to grow and so on. So I think this is a mechanism that there is also a really ideological base in which these resonate to the common sense of the people that live in life. And this common sense is basically this one. In liberal society, so also us, we think that every person has the legitimacy to mobilize all the resources he or she can in order to make possible his or her desire. This is basically the individual liberal person that is the core of the growth. So every subject in our society, in our democracy, has the right as individual to mobilize all the resources that he or she can in order to make possible his her desire. Because in the liberal democracy and the liberal ideology, in order to find the meaning of our life, we have to see our essence as individual. In liberal society, in the modern society that we have been creating as a European and then as a Westernized society, we want to find the meaning in the individuality. Okay? What I was trying to say, for example, differently in the epilogue of our book, is that the meaning can be found only in the collective. There is no meaning in an individual. So the freedom and the autonomy is a concept of a collective. It's not a concept for an individual. Indeed, for example, autonomy for Castoriadis, that has been a philosopher, well, an economist, then a philosopher of Greek that was exiliated because of fascist government in Greece in the 50s and 60s. He was a French living person, economist of OECD, and then a philosopher. He was thinking about autonomy as a collective institution possibility. So the fact that autonomy is the ability for a collective to always create and institutionalize new system. And it was saying, for example, so in line with the, let's say, Foucault that was speaking about heteronomy and so on and so forth. So our democracy is heteronomic, basically, because we don't really, as collective, participate to the reinstitutionalization of our democracy. We cannot make a constituent process of our political system. Basically, we are impeded to do that. And to institute autonomy collective means to create systems that are able to the participant of this collective to participate to the institutionalization, to the continuous constituency of the democracy they are part of. If you think about the fact, for example, Europe is, and then now I don't want to attack, because probably Europe is for me, as Zita says, our fortress in the future. So I'm not, even if I criticize Europe, I'm not an anti-Europeist kind of. But of course, European institutions are heteronomic institutions. As citizens of Europe, we cannot say anything about the Constitution of Europe. We cannot say anything about the political configuration of Europe. How we can think about Europe as an autonomous kind of institution? It's not. The most of us cannot say anything to reshape the institution of Europe. So, of course, this is not the kind of institution that we want. This is not the kind of state or federate state that we want. No? When we think about changing institution, then the state, we want states in which we can reframe the kind of basic constituency principle that organize all the socio-economic system. So for us, and then the growth that we are reflecting about this aspect of moving the concept of freedom and autonomy, not from the individual idea of being free, of using all the resources to go to the moon, to Mars, to make your spaceship journey possible, and so on and so forth, to the freedom and autonomy of collective. Okay, so it's there where we find the meaning as a human being in the collective and not in ourselves. And there It's the political debate of how we mobilize resources to make this life a meaningful life. Okay. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I have been coming in Slovenia in the past 2-3 years, often, let's say, and I like a lot your country. So I hope in the future I will come again, and perhaps we will meet face to face, and not only for discuss, but perhaps again, for cooking or for some convivial kind of meeting too, or party. And so, thank you again. I really appreciate the kind of effort that you are doing. I think it's very important. We need to do whatever is possible in the space where we are. We just get the election. We have trouble now in Barcelona because our law, Ada Colau, didn't success finally, but we are still struggling in order to have her and the groups that are around the Barcelona Comú ideas that really perform a transformation of the city at municipal level. So this is very important because it's very difficult era, and Europe is experiencing a very dangerous raising of fascist, Nazist kind of culture. So we need to stay in the everyday issue of our city, and making groups is very important nowadays to this challenge. So congratulations for taking the responsibility for your place and doing this that is needed. Yeah, indeed. Bye bye. Thanks. Thanks very much.